So I've decided it's time to do a makeover of the front of the house. It's got a very natural look where I've allowed seeds to go beyond the border and self-seed into the gravel. And I do quite like the look, but I've had that for a long time and I just feel like I need a change. Now this general area has a very pink theme to it. We've got this large cherry blossom tree, which is a pale pink. We've got camellias, we've got lots of candelabra primulas in the spring. So I want to maintain that pink look. So I'm thinking cymbidium orchids, I'm thinking bromeliads and some candelabra primulas. So this is on the east side of the house, so it gets sun in the morning, but in the afternoon it's in shade. So it's good for ferns, it's good for the cymbidium orchids, hence my thinking there. And it'll give a bit more colour and the general pink theme. So let's get to it. So I've got my garden armour on, these knee protectors, so that when I kneel down it doesn't damage my knees. Gardening, you find, is a very dangerous activity. So what we're going to be doing is removing this mondo grass. Mondo grass is not strictly a grass, it's more of a lily. It has little white lily flowers and then it has blue or black berries. It's not too dissimilar from liriope, which also has blue or black berries. So this mondo grass is a really great asset in the garden. It's because it grows in the dry and shade, so under trees with tangled roots, and it clumps, but it does eventually kind of take over, and it's taken over here. It's overgrown the boundary. There's a little bit of a dry stone wall here, but it's been hidden by the grass, and it's grown across the wall and into the gravel here. And we've got a different kind of mondo grass here as well. There's two kinds. We've also got some ferns, and I want to keep the ferns, so I'm going to have to tease out the roots. And it's going to be quite a job to get this mondo grass out because it really binds very powerfully into the soil. So I've got a fork and I've got quite a large area, so this is going to be a bit of a mission to get all this mondo grass removed. I've got a place for it though. I've got a tree over there. We'll see that later on, and it's much loved in Japanese gardens, this grass, and I think under this tree it's going to give that Japanese style effect. So let's get to it. So I don't know if you can hear the roots tearing, but it's budging them a little bit. So I'm using all my weight to lever on this, and it's still only gradually coming out. So this is going to take a really long time. But we'll get there in the end. So this is another really good tool for cutting through the mondo grass. It's got a sharp blade. It's actually a trenching spade. You see the great long handle. Good sized chunk. So I've managed to move all the mondo grass from this area, which was quite a mission, and put some compost down. We've exposed the dry stone wall, a little bit of a dry stone wall, and I've got rid of most of the self-seedings that were in the gravel here. Next thing to do would be to plant various plants. I want some Cymbidium orchids, as I mentioned, and maybe a few bromeliads. And along the front I'm going to put some candelabra primulas, which will be pink, which stays with the pink theme of this general area. So I've already planted some Primula malacoides here, looking nice already in flower. Very reliable plant, Primula malacoides. They're pretty much an annual, although a few of them will come back next year as well, but no matter. I've also got some orchids. So this is a Cymbidium orchid. They like a bit of sun, and we do get a bit of sun in the morning. This is the morning here, so as you see, there's a baby Cymbidium, a different variety. So I'm going to plant them in this area. I do have here, this quite large orchid is epidendron. But they actually like more sun, I think more sun than we get here. So I'm going to find another place for a couple of epidendrum orchids that I have. Orchids need good drainage. Most of them are epiphytes, that is, they live in trees rather than growing in the ground. There are some that do grow in the ground, but I've got this orchid mix, so I'll be using that to create a bit of a layer on top of the ground, so we get good drainage, but it's also the right sort of material for them. So let's get going on that. Here is where I planted one of the Cymbidium orchids. It's been planted on the ground in a mound of bark, which is what orchids like as a growth medium. And that mound helps ensure that the roots get good drainage, because otherwise in the ground they could get too wet.
At the base of these pongas there's a couple of baby Cymbidium orchids.
We currently have a Cymbidium orchid flowering in the garden. Let's go and have a look. Here we have a Cymbidium orchid, and it's actually growing in the ground, and the danger of planting orchids in the ground is the roots might rot. But this is under this very large stone pine tree, which sucks out a lot of the moisture out of the ground for a start, but also provides a rain shadow. So I think that the soil here doesn't get too wet, and the drainage is probably pretty good. So it does well enough in the ground here, but as a general rule, most orchids are going to need to be planted above the ground or on top of the ground with a mound, as we saw before. It doesn't get a lot of sun here. Obviously it gets enough because it's flowered, so there's some morning sun that would come in this way, and then later in the day we'll get some sun shafting through here. So I've got a couple of epidendrum orchids, and they are more epiphytic than the Cymbidium orchids. You can see when you look at these orchids there are these aerial roots, which is a bit of a clue. So what I'm planning to do is to plant them in the crux of the branches of this big stone pine trees, and they need more sun than the Cymbidium orchids, and this side of the tree gets more sun than the other side where we saw that Cymbidium orchid. The material that you plant Cymbidium orchids in, and well any orchids, is usually a bark mix. And I do have a bit of bark, and of course the tree provides a lot of bark of its own, as well as some pine needles, which should be a good substrate for the orchids. But I've also got some extra special potting mix as well. And so here I've got this mixture made out of ponga logs from New Zealand. It's a bit like peat, I suppose. So we're going to give that a go. I don't really know whether this is the best spot for these orchids. We're just going to have to try and see. These crooks do seem to have a bit of moisture, so the water must be flowing down the trunks into these parts of the tree. So that's a good sign that it might be a good place to plant them. So we're going to try and see. I planted the orchid and put in the material, but the material's still a little bit loose. No doubt with time the roots of the plant will grab hold of that material and hold it in place. But in the meantime I'm going to put this mesh in place. And I've got these little hooks to hammer them in. All done. there was just half the job. The other half of the job is right here. We've got these ferns that have self-seeded. There's a lot of plants that have self-seeded in the gravel. There's mondo grass, and there's other plants in here that I want to get rid of. So a fair amount of work. There's also a dry stone wall here, and I want to expose that too. So that's the next job. So I've given this area in front of the house a makeover now. I've cleared out a lot of the old plants that I didn't want and put in some new plants. Still got some more plants that need planting. We're in a lockdown at the moment, so it's a bit hard to get access to plants, but I've got a few. Let's have a look. I've managed to get some primulas and some pansies from the supermarket. It's not ideally what I wanted here, but with the festival coming up in just 4 or 5 weeks' time, I really needed something in the ground now. So the bromeliads will have to wait. Let's now see where the mondo grass went. So this is where I've moved the mondo grass to, under this fir tree, which has nice blue cones at a certain time of the year. I did leave a tree fern to grow here, and I should have removed it sooner, I suppose. But as a result, it killed off the branches on this side of the fir tree, and also left a hole there with that tree as well. But I'm going to take advantage of this hole. It exposes a nice twisted trunk of this tree here, and also gives me the opportunity to create a tunnel vision. I've already planted some mondo grass there fairly recently. It needs to clump up and become more luxurious, and this one here is a bit untidy, but with time it'll create a nice level platform throughout, and give it several years, it should look pretty good. This is Libertia, a New Zealand plant, and it's under the washing line, and my wife doesn't want it here, fair enough. So I'm going to move it. I've got a place for it, and let's see where that's going to be. So while we're here in this part of the garden, let me point something out. We've got a washing post here which was keeling over, and we've shored it up with concrete and putting these rocks around it, and it's well and truly shored up now. But we've also taken advantage of this little rockery by putting in some compost and putting in these succulents, and even though they're only planted 2 months ago, they've grown quite a bit, and that's in the middle of winter too. So the ground is getting a little bit hard here, and I think this is another good use for my trenching spade. So I'm just going to go and get that. So that definitely made it a bit easier using this trenching spade. I might also use a fork on a job like this too, but unfortunately the fork's gone for a walk somewhere on this large property. Might not be so easy to find. Bare soil now exposed, but I've got some bark, so we'll just cover it with bark, and hopefully my wife will be happy with that. Among the Libertia are a number of other plants that are growing. One of those is a forget-me-not, and you really have to consider if you want forget-me-nots in a particular area, because if you let them grow there, they self-seed prolifically, and you'll find it very hard to get rid of them. It'll take many years to get rid of them. 1 year of seeding is 7 years of weeding, as they say, and that's probably about right forget-me-nots. So I'm going to take out all the other plants that are growing here and leave just the Libertia, because where I'm taking it to, I just want the Libertia. The new home for the Libertia is right here. There's already one growing there. I've got some growing over there as well. We've got a mixture of oranges and purples here. Orange and purple go very well together. And we've got some purple pansies. We've got a rose which has a purple flower. We've got these plants which are an orange colour. And we've got this Korean fir which has a bluish purpley cone. Now these particular plants here have been shaded out by a silver fern which I've moved, but give it a bit of time, they'll probably bush out, and the orange colour, they would have lost some of the colour because of the shade, the orange colour will come back, so it's all going to look very nice, I think. So you'll notice I've got forget-me-nots here which are just starting to flower. They do flower for a fair length of time, so they are a pretty good plant really. But as I say, they do self-seed everywhere. So where I put them, I try to put them in confined areas. So there's a large tree there, so it's hard for them to push past that tree, and there's some also trees here too. This is my lovely wife Anne. When you qualify something with the word like lovely, it sounds like I might have a number of wives, some who are not so lovely. But may I assure you, this is my only wife. I have a question to ask you, which is, I've removed the plants that were underneath your washing line, getting in the way when you're putting out the washing, and I put some bark down. Are you happy with the work done?
Probably. I have asked my lovely husband to get rid of some flower under the washing line. I haven't done that until now, because, you know, I need the space for my washing.
How many husbands do you have?
I don't know yet. Maybe 1 or 2. Not really, only 1.